Chapter 6. The dog of the Northwest, Red Dog, had his greatest adventures after John's death. He always liked traveling, but when John was alive, Red Dog liked to be with him. Now he was free and answered to nobody. He was well known and well loved in the Northwest, and every week somebody tried to give him a home, make him comfortable, give him good meals. Red Dog liked all these people, and he often stayed a while, but he always moved on sooner or later. Then, months later, there he was, scratching at the door, back again for a short visit and a good meal. He traveled as usual on the Hamersley Iron buses, and in the train to Mount Tom Price. He watched people's faces carefully, still looking for John. He traveled 900 kilometers to Broome with a road train and stayed for 2 weeks, eating every night at the town's hotel. He looked everywhere, but couldn't find John, so he came back in an old car with a large family. One day, he was outside Nancy's caravan on a terribly hot summer day. Nancy and Patsy, with another friend called Ellen, were getting ready to go on holiday. They were planning to drive to Perth, 1,500 kilometers to the south, where it was much less hot. "Hello, Red," said Patsy. "Got nothing to do?" "Why don't we take him with us?" said Ellen. "He'll enjoy the ride." "Want to come to Perth?" asked Nancy. She patted the seat beside her, and the dog jumped into the back. Women smelled nice, and often gave you sweet things to eat, like chocolate. So Red Dog decided to go with them. The 3 women soon remembered why it was a mistake to travel with Red Dog in a small car. They spent the 2 days' drive saying, "Pooey, pooey," and "Oh no, not again, Red." But Red Dog usually had his head out of the window, and so did not hear them. Patsy, Ellen, and Nancy went swimming and lay on the beach in the sunshine. Red Dog enjoyed swimming too, and also the many ball games on the beach. In one game, he ran away with the ball, and people had to chase him up the beach to get it back. One day, Patsy said, "Let's go to Rottnest tomorrow." "You can't take a dog over to Rottnest Island, can you?" said Nancy. "What'll we do with Red?" "Where is Red anyway?" said Ellen, sitting up. They looked up and down the beach. They called and shouted. They went to the hotels and cafes. They looked through the park. Red Dog was nowhere. "You know what we've done?" said Patsy. "We've lost the most famous dog in Western Australia." "When we get home, they're going to kill us," said Nancy. "What are we going to do?" "Just think," said Ellen unhappily, "what Jocko and Pito and Vanno will say." That was the end of their holiday. They went to the best fish restaurants, but they couldn't eat. They went shopping, but they couldn't find anything to buy. So they went home, worrying about Red Dog all the way. When at last they got home, late at night, they found Red Dog waiting for them outside Patsy's caravan. He didn't like Perth very much, and he couldn't find John on the beach, so he found a truck driver to give him a ride home. The 3 women were really pleased to see him and gave him a big meal. "But you're a bad boy, Red," said Patsy. "Look what you did to our holiday. We've still got a few days' holiday, so why don't we go down to Exmouth?" Nancy said. "Yeah, why not?" said the other 2. They all looked at Red Dog, and Ellen said, "Are we taking Red?" "Not on your life," said Nancy and Patsy. Red Dog went to visit Jocko, Pito, and Vanno at Hamersley Iron, and then he went and stayed for a night at the Walkabout Hotel in Karatha. The cook there was a friend of his and always gave him a good meal. 3 days later, he gave the 3 women a very great surprise when he walked past their cafe in Exmouth. He was pleased to see them, but by the next morning he was on his way to Onslow with another truck driver friend. Nancy, Patsy, and Ellen all lived in caravans in the caravan park. Many people were living there while they waited for the builders to finish the new houses. The park was a nice place, with flowers everywhere, but there were 2 things wrong with it. One thing was a rule which said no dogs, and the other thing was a caretaker who liked rules, and who did not like dogs. His name was Mr. Cribbage, and every time he saw a red dog, he tried to chase him away. There was also a cat who lived in the caravan park, called Red Cat. He liked the rule about no dogs because he hated dogs. He was a big cat, with orange-red fur, green eyes, and great paws, which hid long, dangerous claws. Red Cat never lost a fight. Red Dog liked chasing cats. He was a cleverer dog than most, but like most dogs, he did not understand cats. He met Red Cat one day behind Nancy's caravan. At once, he jumped forward to begin the chase, and then stopped, because Red Cat did not run. He sat still, opened his mouth, and hissed. Red Dog jumped again, but still Red Cat did not run. He hissed again, even louder, and his fur stood up all along his back. Red Dog began to feel less sure of himself, but he still wanted to chase. He tried again, but Red Cat hit out with his claws, and blood began to run from Red Dog's nose. Red Dog showed his teeth and growled. Red Cat showed his teeth and hissed. Nose to nose, growling and hissing, the 2 animals moved slowly round in a circle. Red Cat scratched Red Dog again. Red Dog tried to use his teeth, but was too slow. Then Nancy came round the corner and stopped the fight. There was now a new vet in Roebourne, which was much nearer than Port Hedland, and Nancy took Red Dog there. The young vet cleaned the scratches on Red Dog's nose and said, "I saw a dog just like this last week, but he had a different owner, and the week before, another man brought in a dog just like this. Why are there so many dogs round here that all look the same?" Nancy smiled to herself. Red Dog was everybody's dog now, and when Red Dog needed to go to the vet, one of his many friends took him. One day soon the vet would understand the mystery. When Red Dog went back to the caravan park, he looked for Red Cat. They began hissing and growling again, but the fight never happened. And one day, people saw something very surprising. Red Dog and Red Cat were sitting together, side by side, watching the sun go down, just like 2 old people sitting in their garden. They were strange friends, it's true, but friends they were. Red Cat still hated dogs, but not Red Dog. Red Dog still chased cats, but not Red Cat. One day Nancy took a picture of Red Dog sleeping, with Red Cat sleeping on top of him. She made 2 copies, sent one to a newspaper, and put the other copy on her wall. Chapter 7. Red Dog and His Friends. During the years after John's death, Red Dog traveled all over the Northwest. He had many adventures and accidents, and made many new friends. Once he fell off a trailer and hurt his leg. A man called Don, who worked at Dampier Salt Company, found him and took him to the vet in Roebourne. The vet knew all about Red Dog now. He stayed with me once for a few days, the vet told Dawn. Then he went off again. You know what he does? He knows which cars come from Dampier. So he looks for one, then goes and sits next to it until the driver comes back. Then he gets a ride back home. Vets cost money, of course, and who was going to pay the vet's bills for Red Dog? This is what the men of Dampier Salt Company did. They opened a bank account for him at the Wales Bank under the name Red Dog, and everybody put a little money in. He was a dog who belonged to everybody in that part of Australia, and he was often called the Dog of the Northwest. But he had a third name, too. In Australia, anyone with red hair is called Bluey, and some people called him that. To Mr. and Mrs. Cribbage, Red Dog did not have a name. He was just that dog. Red Dog often visited his friends in the caravan park, and one day Mrs. Cribbage saw him when he was scratching at Patsy's door. She ran up to him shouting, "Hey, you! Off! Away!" Red Dog looked at this strange fat woman and scratched again on Patsy's door. Patsy opened the door. "What's up?" she asked Mrs. Cribbage. "No dogs," said Mrs. Cribbage. Patsy looked at her. "You don't understand. This isn't just any dog. This is Red Dog." "A dog's a dog," said Mrs. Cribbage. "It doesn't matter if it's the Queen of England's dog. This is a dog, and that's that. No dogs." "Red Dog's special," Patsy said. "Everyone knows that." "Get that dog out of here," said Mrs. Cribbage. "I'm telling you, if you don't, we'll shoot it, and we'll get you and your caravan out of the park, too." Mrs. Cribbage walked away, feeling pleased. Rules were rules, and she and her husband were the bosses in this caravan park. The next day, she and Mr. Cribbage made a lot of new notices that said no dogs. They went round the park and put a notice up on every tree. The people in the park shook their heads. They agreed a plan to stop Mr. and Mrs. Cribbage catching Red Dog. "If anyone sees the Cribbages when Red Dog is visiting," said Nancy, "just shout cats loudly. Then we'll hide Red Dog, and the Cribbages won't see him." Mr. and Mrs. Cribbage never understood why people in the park went around shouting cats all the time. Now it happened that both Patsy and Nancy were afraid of the dark, and at night there were no lights in the park. So if they had to go out of their caravans to the dunny, that was the toilet, they didn't like it. Red Dog could smell his way around in the dark, but he understood that Nancy and Patsy were afraid. It was a strange thing, but when they needed to go to the dunny at night, there was Red Dog. He walked with them to the dunny, and then walked back again to the caravan. He had lots of nice little meals to thank him for this. But one night Mrs. Cribbage came out of the dunny at the same time as Patsy and saw Red Dog. "What did I tell you about that dog?" she cried. "You're out, girl. I told you. You'll have to leave this park." Patsy felt angry with the Cribbages and their stupid no-dogs rule. "Aw, get lost, why don't you?" she said. "You wait," shouted Mrs. Cribbage. "You just wait." Patsy turned and walked away. "Come on, Red. Let's go back to bed." The next morning somebody pushed a letter under her door. It said, "There is a rule in the park about dogs. No dogs. You are keeping a dog, and we have told you not to, many times. You must now leave this park. Tomorrow morning at 9:30 we will take your caravan out." Mr. and Mrs. Cribbage Patsy went round to Nancy's. "What am I going to do?" she said. "Where am I going to live? This is terrible. They're taking my home away just because of a dog." Nancy put her hand on Patsy's arm. "Don't you worry," she said. "And don't start packing. I know what to do." She took the letter and went from caravan to caravan, showing it to everyone. The next morning, at 9:20, Mr. Cribbage picked up the keys of his truck from the table. "There's a lot of people driving around this morning," said Mrs. Cribbage, looking out of the window. "What are they all doing?" When Mr. Cribbage went outside, he understood. There were cars everywhere, in a circle all around his truck, and across all the roads in the park. He couldn't go anywhere. Nobody could go anywhere. He was too angry to speak. And what was worse, all the people in the park stood around watching him, smiling, calling out, "Going to take Patsy's caravan away, were you? Want any help?" "Looks a bit difficult to me." Mr. Cribbage found his voice. "That dog has to go. It doesn't belong to anyone. I'm calling the police." "That's no good," someone shouted. "Red's a friend of Bill's, and Red belongs to everybody." Mr. Cribbage stood for a moment, then turned and went back into his office. He came out with a gun in his hands. He put 2 bullets into the gun, put the gun under his left arm, and patted it with his right hand. "When I see that dog," he called out, "he's getting this." He turned round and went back inside. Outside, things happened. Very quickly. "He can't do that," people said. "He's mad. He can't shoot Red Dog." "I'm calling the RSPCA," said Patsy. "I'm calling the boys at Hammersley Iron," said Nancy. The RSPCA man arrived and told the Cribbages that they couldn't just shoot a dog. Later, a yellow bus arrived from Hammersley Iron. The workers were strong, hard men, and they were tired after their day's work. Tired and angry. They pushed into Mr. Cribbage's office and all crowded around his desk. Jocko put his hands on the desk and looked down at Mr. Cribbage. "Now, are you the little piece of dirt that wants to shoot Red Dog?" The next morning, very early, Patsy knocked on Nancy's caravan door. "Nance, look! They've gone!" It was true. The Cribbages were no longer there. Their caravan was gone. They were gone. Everything was gone. No one ever saw them again. "I feel terrible," said Patsy later. "We've run them out of town. It's not a very nice thing to do, is it?" "Too late now," said Nancy. "And who's sorry that they've gone? No one knows what Red Dog thought. He went looking for John one more time, riding all the way down to Sweet Adelaide on a trailer. He came back 2 months later on a road train. By the time he next scratched on Nancy's door, there were new caretakers and new rules. Chapter 8. The Last Journey. For all of us there comes a time when our luck ends. Some of us die alone and some not. But everyone goes alone through that last dark door at the end of life. Red Dog was only 8 years old, but he was getting tired. He rode all over Western Australia looking for John. He got into fights. Sometimes he ate too much, sometimes too little. People shot at him. He fell off trucks and trailers. He was cold at night and too hot by day. One day, Nancy was brushing his coat when she found bullet holes in his ears. That was a lucky escape. But one Saturday in November, Pito was driving in his truck from Karatha to Dampier. He saw something dark red at the side of the road. He stopped and got out. Red Dog was in convulsions. His legs, his head, every part of his body was shaking, trying to break itself to bits. It was terrible to watch. Pito tried to lift him into the truck, but he couldn't get a hold on him. Luckily, Bill the policeman came past and stopped to help. People always stop to help when someone is in trouble on the road. Between them, they got him into the truck. "What is it?" said Pito. "What's the matter with him?" "It's poison," said Bill. "I've seen it before. They get these convulsions that last for hours, and then they die." They drove to the police station and called the vet in Roebourne, but the vet was away and not back until the next day. "We can't let it go on like this," said Pito. "Look at him, the poor old dog. It's terrible. We've got to stop it." "You're right," said Bill, "but I don't want to." "You've got to, mate," said Pito softly. "If he goes on like this, he'll break all his bones." They carried Red Dog outside. The convulsions were still terrible, but Pito held him down, and Bill put his gun to the dog's head. Birds sang in the trees above. Pito closed his eyes and waited. Nothing happened. "I'm sorry," said Bill. He put his gun down. "I can't do it. I just can't do it." They called up all Red Dog's friends, and they came round to the little police station. One after another, they held Red Dog while the convulsions went on, and they waited for the vet. They knew Red was dying. They drank tea and told again all the stories about their old friend, the journeys, the terrible stink when he broke wind, finding him by their cars, asking for a ride, arriving at their doors, looking for a meal. "Everyone's got a Red Dog story," said Jocko. "Someone must write them all down." The vet arrived the next morning. "Yes, it's poison," he said. "But he's a strong dog. Let's try and save his life. Hold him down for me while I give him an injection." He gave Red Dog an injection to stop the convulsions, and slowly Red Dog's body stopped shaking and lay still. For 2 days, Red Dog lay still. Then he woke up, wagged his tail, and ate a meal. Everybody was so excited and happy. But the vet had a bad feeling about it. A day or two later, Red Dog began to walk into things and fall down. "It's no good," the vet said. "He can't see and he can't walk. He's not himself. The light in his eyes has gone out. We tried, but now it's time to finish. I'm sorry." Patsy, Ellen, Nancy, Bill the policeman, and the boys from Hamersley Iron and Dampier Salt all called in to say goodbye. The men patted Red Dog on the head. They stroked his back. They pulled his ears. Silently they came in, and silently they went out, trying not to cry, because Aussie men are big, strong men, and big, strong Aussie men don't cry. The women kissed Red Dog on the top of his head, and they stroked his neck. They put their arms around him and held him, and they cried. When everyone was gone, the vet said his goodbye to Red Dog too. He stroked Red Dog's head softly. "Time to go, old mate. Time to go." Then he did what he had to do. Who knows what Red Dog thought about while he lay dying? Perhaps he remembered the good times, going walkabout, chasing wallabies, sitting with Red Cat in the caravan park, riding across the Northwest in the trucks and trailers of his many friends. And perhaps in that last sleep, after years of looking, he found John again. They buried Red Dog in stony red ground between Roebourne and Cossack. No one remembers the place now. His friends put up a monument to him in Dampier, and that is the only thing left of Red Dog. That and the stories about him, and his collar with its tag, which on one side reads Red Dog Bluey, and on the other side, "I've been everywhere, mate."